Every summer, I see the same mistake over and over again. And maybe you are making it too without even knowing it. You look at your cucumber plants during a heat wave, and the leaves seem tired, so you give them more and more water because it feels like the right thing to do. A few days later, the flowers begin to fall, the tiny cucumbers stop growing. The leaves turn dull, and suddenly the harvest you were waiting for is slipping away. I learned the hard way that too much water during extreme heat can hurt cucumbers almost as much as not enough water, and that lesson cost me more than one season. If your cucumbers have ever looked healthy one week and almost finished the next, then stay with me, because what I am about to share completely changed the way I grow them. I am not talking about expensive products or complicated tricks. I am talking about simple old methods that were shown to me many years ago by an older gardener who always seemed to pick fresh cucumbers long after everyone else had given up. At first, I did not believe that such small changes could make any real difference, but after trying them myself, I never went back to my old habits. Today, my cucumber plants stay greener during the hottest weeks they keep producing, when many gardens have already slowed down, and I spend less money because almost everything I use is already around the house. Most people think the sun is the biggest enemy during a heat wave, but that is only part of the story. The real problem begins below the surface where the roots quietly struggle while everything still looks normal from above. By the time the leaves tell you something is wrong, the plant has already lost valuable strength, and recovering becomes much harder. That is why timing matters more than most gardeners realize. In this video, I will show you exactly what I do before the hottest days arrive, how I help the soil stay cool without spending much money, and why one forgotten habit that almost nobody practices anymore has saved more of my cucumber harvest than any fertilizer I have ever bought. And before we get to that first simple step, there is one mistake that nearly every gardener makes during the hottest afternoon, and understanding it changes everything. When I was younger, I believed that if the weather became hotter, I simply had to water more often, and I honestly thought I was helping my plants survive. The strange thing was that every year I still watched healthy cucumber vines slow down, right when they should have been giving me the biggest harvest. The leaves looked heavy instead of fresh. The flowers dried up before they could turn into fruit. Small cucumbers stopped growing halfway and became bitter. It took me years to understand that I was solving the wrong problem. During extreme heat, the roots do not just need more water, they need stable conditions. If the soil is soaked in the morning, then baked hard under the afternoon sun, and soaked again the next day, the roots never have a chance to settle down. They stay under constant stress even though there is plenty of moisture nearby. Most people never notice this because they only look at the leaves. I started paying attention to the soil instead, and that is where everything changed. An older gardener once told me something I never forgot. He said never cool a frightened plant with a flood because it only scares the roots even more. At first those words sounded strange, but after watching my own garden for several summers, I realized exactly what he meant. Healthy cucumber roots like moisture, but they also need air and they need the temperature around them to stay as steady as possible. Every time we pour large amounts of cold water onto hot, dry soil in the middle of the day, we create another shock that the plant has to survive. Very few people still talk about this old lesson because everyone wants a quick fix instead. What finally worked for me was much simpler than buying expensive fertilizers or miracle products. I changed the time I watered and I changed the way I protected the soil itself. Within a couple of weeks, I noticed the vines stayed stronger even when the afternoon sun felt almost unbearable. New flowers continued to appear and the fruits kept growing instead of stopping halfway. That was the moment I understood that saving cucumbers during a heat wave is not about fighting the sun. It is about helping the roots stay calm. And the first forgotten method I started using costs almost nothing yet. Most gardeners walk right past it every single day without realizing how powerful it really is. The first old method I want to share is so simple that many people ignore it because it does not come in a colorful bag from a garden store. I almost ignored it myself until one summer when nothing else seemed to work. An older neighbor walked over to my garden, looked at my cucumber bed for less than a minute, and smiled. He did not ask how much fertilizer I used or how often I watered. He simply picked up a handful of dry grass lying near the fence and said, This is worth more than another bucket of water if you use it the right way. I thought he was joking, but I listened anyway because his cucumbers always stayed green, while everyone else's plants looked tired by the middle of July. He showed me how to cover the soil around every cucumber plant with a thick layer of dry grass straw or even dried leaves. He never piled it against the stem because that could trap too much moisture. Instead, he left a small space around the base of the plant and covered the rest of the soil. At first, nothing looked different, but after a few days, I noticed something that surprised me. Even during the hottest afternoons, the soil underneath stayed cool and slightly moist while the uncovered ground nearby became hard and cracked. That simple layer slowed down evaporation and protected the roots from sudden temperature changes. I also found that I needed much less water than before because the moisture stayed where the plant actually needed it. Most people make the mistake of leaving the soil completely bare, thinking the sun should warm it as much as possible. During extreme heat, that bare soil becomes like a hot pan, and the roots suffer even if they never see the sunlight themselves. Very few people still use this forgotten habit, even though it saves water, keeps weeds under control, and costs almost nothing if you collect the material from your own yard. Every summer, I refresh the layer whenever it becomes too thin, and I never regret taking those extra few minutes. The cucumber vines reward me with steady growth instead of slowing down every time the weather becomes difficult. But there is another mistake that many gardeners make even after they protect the soil. They water at the wrong moment of the day and unknowingly force the plants into even more stress. Once I understood the best time to water, everything became much easier. And that is the next lesson I wish someone had taught me many years earlier. The next lesson changed the way I looked at watering forever because I finally understood that it is not only about how much water you give your cucumbers, but also about when you give it. I used to come home in the late afternoon, see the leaves hanging down in the heat, and immediately grab the hose. It felt like the right thing to do because the plants looked thirsty. The problem was that I was reacting to what I could see instead of thinking about what was happening below the surface. An experienced gardener stopped me one evening and told me to leave the hose alone until the next morning. He explained that cucumber leaves often droop during the hottest part of the day as a way of protecting themselves from losing too much moisture. That does not always mean the roots need more water right away. I decided to trust his advice, and the next morning before the sun became strong, I watered slowly and deeply instead of giving the plants a quick shower every afternoon. The difference surprised me more than I expected. The soil stayed evenly moist much longer, and the plants looked healthier through the entire day. I also stopped splashing water over the leaves because warm, wet leaves can invite problems that no gardener wants to deal with. Instead, I directed the water close to the base of each plant and let it soak in little by little. Very few people have the patience to water this way because it takes a little more time, but the roots benefit from every minute. Another small habit helped even more. After watering, I gently checked the soil with my finger a couple of inches below the surface, instead of guessing from the top layer. Many times the surface looked completely dry while the soil underneath still held enough moisture for another day. That simple check saved water and prevented me from overwatering. Most gardeners make the mistake right here because they trust what they see instead of what the roots actually feel. My water bill became smaller, and my cucumber harvest became larger at the same time, which still makes me smile every season. But there is one more forgotten trick that works together with careful watering and mulch. It helps the plants stay productive even when several days of extreme heat arrive one after another, and very few gardeners think about doing it until it is too late. Now let me share another old habit that almost disappeared even though it can save a cucumber crop during the hottest weeks of summer. Most people spend all their attention on watering, but they forget that the afternoon sun can become simply too strong for tender cucumber leaves and young fruits. Many years ago, I noticed that wild plants growing along old fences often stayed healthier than the same vegetables growing out in the open. The reason was surprisingly simple. They received a little shade during the hottest hours, but plenty of sunlight in the morning and late afternoon. That observation stayed with me, and I decided to try something similar in my own garden. I did not build anything expensive. I stretched a piece of old shade cloth above the cucumber bed, and one year I even used an old white bed sheet supported by simple wooden stakes. The cover did not block all the sunlight because cucumbers still need light to grow. It only softened the strongest afternoon heat when the sun was at its highest. The difference became clear after only a few days. The leaves stayed firm much longer, and the flowers remained on the vines instead of drying up and falling away. The fruits also developed more evenly because the plants were no longer wasting so much energy trying to survive the hottest part of the day. Most gardeners never think about giving cucumbers temporary shade because they believe more sunlight always means more harvest. During normal weather, that may be true, but during extreme heat, too much direct sun becomes another source of stress. Very few people still use this simple method because it seems almost too easy to make a difference. I can tell you from experience that it does. I also learned another small secret from that same neighbor. He told me never to remove old yellow leaves all at once during a heat wave. I used to clean the plants until they looked neat, but I was exposing the fruits to direct sunlight without realizing it. Now I remove only damaged leaves a little at a time, and I let the healthy ones continue protecting the cucumbers naturally. That small change reduced sun damage and helped the vines stay productive much longer. But there is one final lesson that ties all these simple methods together. And once I understood it, I stopped worrying every time the weather forecast warned about another week of intense summer heat. After all these years, I have learned that the biggest harvest does not come from working harder. It comes from paying attention to the small things before the plants begin asking for help. When a long heat wave is coming, I no longer wait until my cucumbers start looking weak. I prepare the bed ahead of time because it is much easier to keep a healthy plant healthy than it is to bring back a plant that has already been under stress for several days. One thing that helps me every season is walking through the garden early in the morning while everything is still cool. I look at every vine without rushing. I check the color of the leaves. I look for tiny cucumbers that have just started growing. I gently lift a little mulch to feel the soil underneath. Those few quiet minutes often tell me much more than any weather forecast. Very few people do this because life is busy, and many gardeners only visit their vegetable patch after work, when the afternoon heat has already changed the way the plants look. I have found that the morning tells the real story. If I notice a damaged leaf, I remove it carefully. If I see a cucumber that has grown to a good size, I harvest it instead of leaving it on the vine too long. That is another old habit many people forget. When you keep picking ripe cucumbers, the plant keeps trying to produce more. If large fruits stay on the vine for too long, the plant begins to slow down because it believes its work is already finished. I never pull roughly on the fruit because that can damage the vine. I use a small pair of scissors or garden pruners and make a clean cut. It only takes a few extra seconds, but it protects the plant from unnecessary stress. I also avoid feeding cucumbers with heavy amounts of fertilizer during extreme heat, because forcing fast growth when the plant is already struggling rarely ends well. Healthy soil, steady moisture, gentle shade, and regular harvesting have given me far better results than chasing quick solutions in a bottle. Every year I am reminded that the oldest gardening lessons are often the ones that stay true the longest. And there is one final idea that brought all of these simple methods together for me. Once I accepted it, I stopped fearing the hottest days of summer and started looking forward to seeing just how long my cucumber plants could keep producing. If there is one thing I hope you remember after watching this video, it is that cucumbers do not need complicated care to survive extreme summer heat. They simply need steady conditions and a gardener who understands what they are trying to say. I stopped chasing expensive products a long time ago because I discovered that the simplest methods often bring the best results. A layer of mulch, deep watering at the right time, gentle shade during the hottest hours, harvesting regularly, watching the soil instead of guessing. None of these ideas are difficult and none of them cost very much, but together they completely change the way my garden performs every summer. I still have hot days when the sun feels almost too strong, and I still see cucumber leaves droop for a while during the afternoon. The difference now is that I do not panic anymore because I know the plants have everything they need below the surface. They recover when the evening cools down, and they continue producing fresh cucumbers day after day. That quiet confidence is something every gardener can have because it does not come from luck. It comes from paying attention to simple habits that have worked for generations. Many years from now, new gardening products will appear and new promises will be made, but healthy soil, careful watering, and patient observation will never go out of style. That is why I continue using these forgotten methods every season. They save money, they save time, and they help me enjoy gardening instead of worrying about every weather forecast. I hope these ideas help you keep your own cucumber plants healthy through the hottest weeks of summer and reward you with a harvest that lasts much longer than you expected. If even one of these simple habits makes a difference in your garden, then this conversation was worth having. And next time I want to show you another forgotten trick that older gardeners use to grow sweeter tomatoes with less watering during dry summers. Very few people still use it today, but once you see how simple it is, you may never grow tomatoes the same way again.